In this tutorial, we'll be using a trigger to activate a camera effect. Specifically, we're going to make the camera have a blue tint when the player enters the water. So you should have the Vicious Engine open with the physics demo map open, and then click on the map button to make sure that's what we have selected. We're going to go down to triggers and click on edit, and we're going to create a new trigger. Let's name that trigger TGR underscore water underscore effect. And it's really small right now. It's a plane that's 1 meter by 1 meter. We're going to make that 400 by 400. And then when we click out here, you can see the plane. The problem is that it's positioned vertically, and we want it to be positioned horizontally with the map. So to do that, we're going to go down to the pitch where it says P in the bottom right, and we're going to change that to 90 degrees. And now you can see that it changed it to be horizontal, and we still want to center it correctly and put it at the right height. So the X should be 0 and the Y should be 0. So now it's exactly on top of our map. And then our Z value is how high it's going to be. Well, if you look at the back view, you can see the yellow line represents where our trigger is. This black line underneath it represents the plane of our water. So we want to move that down to the same height as our water. Let's change the Z to 10. If we were to leave the trigger right there, it would be exactly in the same place as the water. We're actually going to lower it to 9. And now you can see that the trigger is slightly lower than the water level. Now the reason I'm doing that is because triggers respond to mesh roots. That means for Gwen, her mesh root is her torso. So when her torso hits the trigger, it's going to give a blue tint to the camera. Well, because her torso is about 1 meter lower than her head, then we wanted to lower that trigger a little bit so that when her torso is hitting the trigger, her head is hitting the top of the water, and that's when the camera effect is going to happen. We can also set the color for the trigger so that anytime we're editing or using the Vicious Engine editor, we can see that trigger easily. The colors are always used by are set by RGB, red, green, blue values. So I selected my RGB values to be 11, 162, and 231 for my color. Now I'm going to click on the on enter to give it a script for what will happen when we enter the trigger. And I'm going to right click and select add action camera op. So now we have a line of text here. We're going to double click that script, and you'll see that the camera op script line opens up over here. And notice that it says initiator for the camera. If there was a camera assigned to Gwen, we could leave this as initiator because she is the person that will be initiating the trigger. In this situation though, there is no camera assigned to Gwen. So what we need to do is click on camera and change the type to viewport 1. And then you can press the back button. And we also want to change the op to enable effect. And for the value, we want to create a number. And let's just make this 1. Press return, and then click the back. So this effect is stored in value set 1, which I'll explain later. We can also set the blend time, which is the time it takes the effect to come into play. So I'm going to set mine by creating a new number and making it 0.5. So that means it will be a half a second for that effect to take place. Now for the effect, we're going to create a new effect, and we're going to name this island underscore water underscore effect. Now effects can have many different layers, and each layer could represent something else that's happening. So we're going to have one layer that's going to have a blue tint to it, but we could, for instance, have another layer that has water moving. To make our layer, we're going to change the layers to 1, and now you'll see 0 layers. That's our first layer, and we're going to click on the edit, and for the draw layer, we're going to make that post scene so that it draws it at the beginning of the scene. And we need to create a new material. So for material, click the little create button. And we're going to call this blue _ tint. Change the blend mode to add, and the diffuse color, I will set the red to 0, the green to 0, and the blue to 160. Now, the way this works is because we're using the add for the blend mode, then that means that for every pixel when this tint happens, the red will be increased by 0, the green will be increased by 0, and the blue will be increased by 160. Also, we need to set something for the diffuse texture. We're just going to hit the plus sign and choose white, just because we need something for the texture. Now if we click over here, you can see that what the script says now. It says that for the viewport 1, the camera for that will enable an effect when that trigger is hit. And this is what's going to happen when we enter the water. So now we need to figure out what's going to happen when we exit the water. And now I'm going to click on trigger, which will bring up our trigger. And you can see that we have some stuff in the on enter. Now we need to look at the on exit and click on that. And we are going to again right click on this screen, go to add, action, camera, op, and we're going to add a line of code for the on exit. So I'm going to double click that line of code, make sure it's open over here. I'm going to go to camera and change the type to viewport 1. And then go back. Then I'm going to go to the op and change it to disable effect, because that's what we're going to be doing when we go out of this trigger. For the effect that we're going to disable, we cannot specify the effect by name. We actually have to specify it by its value. So why do we have to specify it by its value? Well, we may have many effects assigned to the same value. Value set 1 may be assigned to all the effects that occur when you enter the water. So by having them all in the same value, we can easily disable all the effects that go along with entering the water. For the value, I'm going to click the Create tab and go to Number and make this 1 and go back. So now our value is 1, and the blend time, let's make it a half a second again. So click on the Create Number and change this to 0.5, which means that it'll take a half a second for the effect to fade away. Once you have the on exit and the on enter for the trigger, then we should be ready to test it. So I'm going to press the run button. It's going to ask me to save these objects, and we're going to say OK. And I'm going to run into the water and see if the blue tint that we created is triggered. And you can see it took about a half a second for that blue to fade in. I'm going to run back out of the water, and then it took about a half a second for the blue to fade out.